The trials also reveal the deep-seated misogyny of the era. While some men are accused, the vast majority of those targeted are women, particularly those who are marginalized, outspoken, or defy societal norms in some way. You might observe the way women are questioned more aggressively, their words scrutinized for any hint of defiance or unorthodoxy. The fear of female power, of women stepping outside their prescribed roles, seems to intertwine with the fear of witchcraft, creating a dangerous double standard. It's like a historical version of a Karen meme, but instead of just complaining to the manager, they're accusing you of consorting with Satan. Hey guys, and tonight we're stepping back in time, not to a sun-drenched beach or a bustling medieval market, but to a place shrouded in a different kind of darkness, the small, isolated village of Salem, Massachusetts, in the late 17th century. Imagine the biting New England wind whipping around your simple, unheated home, the scent of wood smoke perpetually clinging to your clothes, and the ever-present, watchful eye of God, or so you're taught, scrutinizing every single thought and deed. This isn't a vacation spot, friend. In fact, if you were dropped into this era with your modern sensibilities and your penchant for, say, wearing bright colors or expressing an opinion, you'd probably be accused of something within a week. You might not even survive the first winter, let alone the social climate. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you're listening, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always wild to see where these stories reach. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The public spectacle of the trials, a common historical fact, serves as a powerful reinforcement of the community's beliefs. Each conviction, each execution, is seen as a victory against the devil, a sign that God is on their side. You might witness the grim satisfaction on some faces in the crowd, the sense of righteous vengeance, even as others are clearly disturbed by the unfolding tragedy. The hangings on Gallows Hill become a morbid ritual, a public display of the community's determination to purge itself of evil. You find yourself in a world where the line between the sacred and the profane is razor thin. A world where every rustle in the woods, every unexplained illness, every crop failure could be attributed not to natural causes, but to the insidious hand of the devil himself. This is Puritan New England, a place founded on the purest, most unyielding religious conviction, where life is a constant test of your piety, a relentless battle against temptation and sin. You wake with the sun, your days dictated by chores, prayer, and the strictures of your community. There's no room for frivolity, no time for idle hands. Your clothes are drab, your speech measured, your thoughts, ideally focused on salvation. It's a life of stark simplicity, driven by an almost obsessive fear of eternal damnation. As the summer progresses, the number of accused continues to climb, reaching well over 100. The sheer scale of the arrests and the speed of the convictions are staggering. You might feel a sense of overwhelming helplessness, watching as more and more innocent lives are swept away by the tide of hysteria. The machinery of justice, once meant to protect, has become an instrument of destruction, fueled by fear and superstition. You walk down the narrow, muddy paths of Salem Village, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and the distant bleating of sheep. The houses are small, functional, built for survival, not comfort. Every face you pass seems etched with a certain solemnity, a quiet determination. Laughter, when it occurs, is hushed, almost apologetic. Children are seen, not heard, their play often mirroring the serious pursuits of their elders. You learn early that conformity is not just encouraged, it's practically mandatory. To deviate, even slightly, from the established norms is to invite suspicion, to draw the unwanted gaze of your neighbors and, more importantly, the elders of the church. This collective vigilance, this constant self-policing, forms the very bedrock of their society. It's a system designed to keep the flock pure, but it also creates an environment ripe for paranoia. Historians still debate the precise legal precedents and interpretations that allowed spectral evidence to be admitted and given such weight in the trials. Was it a deliberate misinterpretation of existing laws, or simply a reflection of the prevailing legal and theological understanding of witchcraft at the time. You might find yourself poring over dusty legal texts, trying to decipher the logic, or lack thereof. That led to such devastating outcomes. Consider the common historical fact that the Puritans believed literally in the devil as an active, malevolent force in the world, constantly seeking to corrupt souls and undermine God's kingdom. This wasn't some abstract concept. It was a tangible, ever-present threat. You might imagine him lurking in the shadows of the dense forests surrounding the village, whispering temptations or manifesting through the actions of his earthly agent witches. This deep-seated belief system meant that when strange things began to happen, the default explanation wasn't a medical condition or a psychological breakdown, but rather a spiritual attack. It's like if your Wi-Fi suddenly cut out, and instead of checking the router, you immediately assumed a demon was messing with your Netflix. A bit of an overreaction, perhaps, but in their world, it made perfect, terrifying sense. The cries of the accused, their desperate pleas and fervent denials, echo through the courtroom, through the prison cells, and finally, on Gallows Hill. They are the voices of those caught in the horrifying truth of the Salem witch trials, individuals whose lives were irrevocably altered and often ended by the unchecked power of fear and the tragic distortion of justice. Their stories serve as a stark reminder of the fragility of truth and the devastating consequences of mass hysteria. Now, for a lesser-known detail, did you know that Salem Village, where the trials largely originated, was actually distinct from the wealthier, more established Salem town? Salem Village was a more rural agricultural outpost, struggling with its own internal divisions and disputes, particularly over land and the selection of its minister. You might find yourself caught in these simmering tensions, feeling the resentment between families, the quiet whispers about who owned which patch of land, or who truly deserved a seat of power in the church. These mundane, earthly squabbles, often dismissed in the grand narrative of the witch trials, actually provided a fertile ground for accusations to take root. It's like a small-town drama where everyone knows everyone's business, but instead of gossip leading to a bad reputation, it could lead to a noose. Talk about high stakes for a neighborhood spat. The very heart of the Salem witch trials, the engine that drove its terrifying momentum, lay in the profound religious convictions of the Puritan community. You must understand that for these people, God and the devil were not abstract concepts debated in theological circles. They were tangible, ever-present forces locked in an eternal, cosmic battle for the souls of humankind. And you, as a Puritan, were caught squarely in the middle of this spiritual war. Every aspect of your life, from the way you dressed to the thoughts you harbored, was seen as a reflection of your allegiance in this grand struggle. You attend the Sabbath services, long and arduous, where the minister's sermon thunders down from the pulpit, painting vivid pictures of hellfire and damnation for the unrighteous. You sit on hard wooden benches, your mind struggling to stay focused, your body aching from the long week of labor. Every word is meant to instill fear, to remind you of your inherent sinfulness and your absolute dependence on God's grace. The concept of predestination hangs heavy in the air. The idea that your fate, whether salvation or damnation, is already decided by God, regardless of your earthly actions. Yet, paradoxically, you are still expected to live a life of unwavering piety, constantly searching for signs of your own election. It's a bit of a cosmic catch-22, isn't it? You're already chosen or not, but you still have to act like you're trying to get chosen. It's enough to give anyone an existential headache. The common historical fact that underpins this entire period is the Puritan belief in a literal, active devil who could and would make pacts with humans. This wasn't just folklore, it was a fundamental tenet of their faith. You would have been taught from childhood that the devil roamed the earth, seeking to ensnare the unwary, to tempt the righteous, and to establish his kingdom through his human agents. When the strange afflictions began, it was almost a foregone conclusion that the devil was at work. It wasn't a question of if he was involved, but how he was manifesting and through whom. It's like if you were told your entire life that dragons were real and breathed fire, and then you saw smoke coming from your neighbor's chimney. You wouldn't think, oh, they're just having a barbecue. You'd think, dragon, the community is small, insular. Everyone knows everyone else's business. and privacy is a luxury you simply don't possess. Your neighbors are not just people you live near, they are fellow travelers on the path to righteousness. And also, potentially, your judges. If you fall ill, if your cow stops giving milk, if your child cries out in the night, the first thought isn't always about natural causes. It's about who might have a grievance against you, who might harbor ill will, who might be consorting with the dark forces. This constant scrutiny, coupled with a deep-seated fear of the unknown, creates a pressure cooker environment where suspicion can quickly boil over into accusation. You learn to be careful with your words, to guard your expressions, to ensure that you always appear devout and beyond reproach. You attend another long, solemn sermon, the minister's voice a low, resonant hum that fills the meeting house. He speaks of the devil's cunning, his ability to deceive, to appear as an angel of light even as he works his evil. He warns of the insidious nature of witchcraft, not just as a crime against man, but as the ultimate betrayal of God. You feel the weight of his words, the chilling conviction that every unexplained misfortune, every personal failing, could be a sign of the devil's influence. This constant reinforcement of demonic omnipresence creates a fertile ground for paranoia, where every shadow seems to hold a witch, and every unusual event is a sign of a satanic plot. The long, dark winters only intensified this sense of isolation and vulnerability. With limited light and warmth, diseases spread easily, and death is a constant companion. The harshness of the environment reinforces the Puritan worldview. Life is a struggle, a trial, and only the truly righteous will endure. You huddle by the fire, listening to the wind howl outside, and your imagination, already primed by tales of demonic possession and witchcraft, begins to fill the darkness with unseen threats. It's a bit like watching a horror movie alone in a cabin in the woods. Except the horror movie is your actual life, and the cabin is your actual cabin. And the woods are actually full of wolves and bears and possibly witches. Not exactly a cozy night in. A lesser-known detail about this religious context is the concept of invisible bullets, or witchcraft by glance. The afflicted girls would claim that the specters of the accused witches would shoot invisible projectiles at them, causing them pain, or that a mere glance from a witch could inflict torment. Imagine being in the courtroom, watching an accused person simply look at one of the afflicted, and the afflicted person immediately screams, clutching their chest, claiming an invisible bullet has struck them. To the Puritan mind, this wasn't an absurd claim. It was tangible evidence of the devil's power working through his agents. You might flinch, even if you don't fully believe it, because the sheer conviction in the girls' performances is enough to make you doubt your own senses. It's like someone telling you they can make your teeth hurt just by looking at you, and then you suddenly feel a phantom ache. You know it's probably not real, but the suggestion alone is enough to make you uncomfortable. The children of Salem, particularly the young girls, live under the same rigid constraints as the adults, but with perhaps even less outlet for their natural youthful energy. Their play is often supervised, their education focused on religious texts. They are taught to fear God, to fear the devil, and to obey their elders without question. When the first strange behaviors begin to manifest among them, it's not immediately dismissed as childish antics or illness. Instead, it's viewed through the lens of their deeply ingrained beliefs, making it all the more terrifying and inexplicable. You might see them gathered, whispering, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and something else, something almost like excitement. The ministers, as spiritual leaders, played a complex and often contradictory role. Initially, many supported the trials, seeing them as a necessary purging of evil from the community. They provided theological justifications for the existence of witchcraft and the methods of identifying witches. Their sermons often fueled the fear, emphasizing the urgency of rooting out the devil's servants. You might hear them quoting scripture, particularly passages from the Old Testament that condemn witches, reinforcing the idea that this was God's righteous battle. Their authority, unquestioned in this deeply religious society, lent immense credibility to the proceedings. Historians still debate whether the internal conflicts within Salem Village, the long-standing feuds over land, the contentious relationship with their minister, Samuel Parris, and the economic disparities between the village and the more prosperous town were merely background noise or a significant catalyst that primed the community for the outbreak of accusations. Were these social fractures the kindling that allowed the spark of fear to ignite into a raging inferno? Or were they simply a pre-existing condition that made the fire burn hotter? You might find yourself caught in the middle of these local squabbles, perhaps siding with one faction against another, unknowingly contributing to the very tensions that would soon explode into something far more sinister. It's a reminder that sometimes the most horrifying truths are rooted not in grand, supernatural conspiracies, but in the petty, all-too-human conflicts that simmer beneath the surface of everyday life. However, as the trials progressed and the accusations began to target more prominent and pious individuals, some ministers started to express reservations. Cotton Mather, a highly influential Boston minister, while a staunch believer in witchcraft, published memorable providences relating to witchcrafts and possessions in 1689, which detailed a previous case of possession in Boston. He advocated for careful, cautious prosecution, but also warned against relying solely on spectral evidence. His father, Increase Mather, another prominent clergyman and president of Harvard College, later published cases of conscience concerning evil spirits personating men, which argued strongly against the use of spectral evidence, stating that it were better that 10 suspected witches should escape than one innocent person should be condemned. This shift in theological opinion, a common historical fact, eventually played a crucial role in the winding down of the trials. It's like the head of a major tech company suddenly saying, "Hey, maybe that new algorithm we rolled out is actually causing more problems than it solves." It doesn't stop the whole system immediately, but it definitely gets people thinking. You might recall the story of Tituba, a West Indian slave owned by Reverend Samuel Parris, who would tell tales of voodoo and magic to the young girls of the village. This seemingly innocuous act, a way to pass the long, dark evenings, would soon take on a terrifying significance. The girls, bored and perhaps seeking an outlet for their repressed emotions, found themselves captivated by these stories, which offered a glimpse into a world far removed from their austere Puritan existence. It's like being stuck in a small town with nothing to do, and then someone introduces you to a new, forbidden video game. You know you shouldn't play it, but the temptation is just too strong. And in Salem, that forbidden game was a dangerous one indeed. Historians still debate the extent to which the Puritan clergy were victims of their own theological framework, genuinely believing in the demonic conspiracy, or if some actively manipulated the situation for personal or political gain. Were they truly blinded by their faith, or were there more cynical motives at play beneath the surface of their righteous pronouncements? You might find yourself observing the ministers, their faces solemn and authoritative, and wonder if their conviction was absolute, or if a flicker of doubt ever crossed their minds as they sent people to their deaths. The stage is set, a community steeped in religious fervor, isolated by geography and ideology, riddled with internal strife, and perpetually on guard against the forces of evil. The air is thick with unspoken anxieties, with the quiet hum of fear that permeates every aspect of life. You can almost feel it, a low thrumming beneath your feet, a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The ordinary seems poised to become extraordinary, the mundane about to descend into madness. You sense that something is about to break, that the rigid structure of this society, so carefully constructed, is about to crack under the weight of its own convictions. And when it does, the consequences will be utterly devastating, forever altering the landscape of this quiet corner of New England. The concept of the Devil's Book was central to the Puritan understanding of witchcraft. It was believed that witches signed a pact with the devil, literally signing their names in his book, thereby renouncing God and pledging allegiance to Satan. This act was seen as the ultimate blasphemy, an unforgivable sin. Confessions often included vivid descriptions of this signing, sometimes with the devil appearing as a black man or a specific animal familiar. You might hear a confessed witch describe the chilling moment they put their name to this infernal document, a detail that would send shivers through the courtroom and confirm the worst fears of the onlookers. The whispers begin subtly, almost imperceptibly, like the first faint rustle of leaves before a storm. You're going about your daily routine, perhaps mending a torn garment or tending to the fire, when you start to hear hushed conversations in the marketplace, glimpses of worried faces gathered outside the meeting house. It's early 1692, and something is amiss in the household of Reverend Samuel Parris. His 9-year-old daughter, Betty Parris, and his 11-year-old niece, Abigail Williams, begin to exhibit truly bizarre behaviors. You hear tales of them falling into strange fits, contorting their bodies into unnatural positions, uttering incoherent sounds, and complaining of invisible tormentors pinching and biting them. It's not just a childish tantrum. This is something far more disturbing, far more unsettling. The fear of the devil was not just a theological concept. It was deeply ingrained in the daily lives of the Puritans. They saw his hand in every misfortune, every temptation, every deviation from the strict path of righteousness. This constant vigilance against evil created a society highly susceptible to mass panic when something truly inexplicable occurred. The afflictions of the girls, therefore, were not just strange behaviors. They were direct assaults by the devil, a sign that he was actively trying to undermine their holy experiment in the New World. You might witness one of these episodes firsthand. Perhaps you're visiting the Parris home, bringing a basket of fresh eggs or a newly baked loaf of bread. As you step inside, a sudden shriek pierces the quiet. Betty, previously sitting calmly by the hearth, suddenly arches her back, her eyes rolling back in her head, her limbs jerk violently, as if pulled by unseen strings. She might babble in a language you don't understand, or scream out that she's being choked. Abigail, too, might begin to writhe on the floor, complaining of sharp pains, pointing accusingly at empty air. The adults around them, particularly Reverend Parris and his wife, are beside themselves with fear and confusion. They try to soothe the girls, to pray over them, but nothing seems to alleviate their suffering. It's a terrifying spectacle, unlike anything you've ever witnessed. The ministers also emphasized the importance of confession as a path to salvation. If a witch confessed, repented, and named others, they were seen as having returned to God's grace, even if their earthly punishment was still severe. This theological incentive to confess, a common historical fact, created the perverse dilemma for the accused: confess to a lie and live, or maintain your innocence and face certain death. You might hear the ministers earnestly urging the accused to give glory to God by confessing, framing it not as a legal maneuver, but as a spiritual imperative. It's like being told that the only way to prove you didn't steal the cookies is to admit you stole the cookies and then tell them who else stole cookies. It's a logic puzzle with a very painful solution. The common historical fact here is that these initial afflictions of Betty Parris and Abigail Williams were the spark that ignited the entire Salem witch trials. Their symptoms, initially baffling to the community, were eventually attributed to witchcraft. This wasn't a sudden, widespread phenomenon. It began with just 2 young girls in one household. It's a bit like a small fire starting in a dry forest, easily contained at first. But with the right conditions, it can quickly become an uncontrollable blaze. And Salem, as you know, was a very dry forest indeed. The religious fervor also meant that any skepticism or doubt about the trials was often interpreted as a lack of faith, or even as a sign of being in league with the devil. To question the afflicted, or the magistrates, was to question God's work. This created an environment where dissent was dangerous, effectively silencing any voices of reason that might have emerged earlier. You might feel the pressure to conform, to believe, to participate in the collective fear, knowing that to stand apart was to invite suspicion upon yourself. As the days turn into weeks, the girls' symptoms don't abate. In fact, they seem to worsen and spread. Other young women in the village, like Ann Putnam Jr. and Mercy Lewis, begin to exhibit similar afflictions. You might see them in the meeting house during a sermon, suddenly crying out, interrupting the minister with screams of torment. They might complain of being pricked by pins or seeing specters, ghostly forms of people they know, who are allegedly tormenting them. The community, already steeped in the belief of an active devil, struggles to comprehend what is happening. They consult their Bibles. They pray. They look for answers in their rigid religious framework. The only explanation that seems to fit, the only one that truly resonates with their deepest fears, is witchcraft. A lesser-known detail is that some of the accused, particularly those who were highly respected members of the church, initially refused to believe that the devil could appear in the form of an innocent person. They argued that God would not allow such a deception. However, as the trials progressed and more pious individuals were accused, this theological point became a crucial area of contention. The debate over whether the devil could personate or impersonate an innocent person became a key factor in undermining the validity of spectral evidence. It's like a software update that introduces a major security flaw, and then everyone has to debate whether the flaw is a feature or a bug. And in Salem, that bug was causing a lot of crashes. A lesser-known detail about these early afflictions is that some of the girls would reportedly crawl under furniture or into fireplaces, exhibiting behaviors that were truly out of the ordinary and deeply unsettling to the Puritan sensibility. Imagine the shock and horror of seeing a young, seemingly pious girl, who has been raised to be meek and obedient, suddenly behaving in such a wild, uncontrolled manner. It's not just a fit, it's a complete violation of every social and religious norm they hold dear. You might hear whispers that these actions are not their own, that they are being compelled by an external, malevolent force. This kind of behavior, so alien and frightening, only serves to solidify the community's conviction that something truly demonic is at play. It's like watching a perfectly normal, well-behaved robot suddenly start glitching and doing parkour. You know something is fundamentally wrong, and it's probably not just a loose wire. The belief in God's divine providence also played a significant role. The Puritans believed that God actively intervened in the world, sending signs and judgments. The afflictions, therefore, were seen as a divine warning, a test of their faith, and a call to action against the forces of evil. This worldview instilled a sense of urgency and righteousness in the prosecution of the trials, making it difficult for anyone to question the process without appearing to question God himself. You feel the weight of this divine mandate, the sense that you are part of a grand, sacred mission. The local doctor, William Griggs, is called in to examine the afflicted girls. You might see him, a man of science in a world of faith, looking bewildered and helpless. After examining them, he can find no physical cause for their ailments. His diagnosis, delivered with a grave expression, is chilling. The girls are under an evil hand. This pronouncement, coming from a man of medical authority, serves as a powerful validation for the community's growing suspicions, and it essentially confirms what many already fear, that the devil has indeed made his way into Salem Village, and he is working through human agents. It's like getting a doctor's note that says, "Patient is suffering from demonic possession. Recommend exorcism?" Not exactly standard medical advice, but in 1692 it was about as good as it got. The interplay between God and the devil, between salvation and damnation, was not just a backdrop to the Salem witch trials. It was the very stage upon which the tragedy unfolded. The deep-seated religious beliefs of the Puritans, their unwavering conviction in the reality of Satan and his earthly agents, provided the framework through which every strange event, every accusation, and every confession was interpreted. It was a world where faith, when twisted by fear and misunderstanding, could become a terrifying instrument of destruction. With the doctor's grim assessment, the focus shifts from understanding the affliction to identifying the afflictors. Who could be doing this? Who among them would dare to consort with the devil and bring such torment upon innocent children? The girls, in their fits, begin to name names. The first three accused are Tituba, the Paris family's enslaved woman; Sarah Good, a poor, marginalized woman known for her pipe smoking and muttering; and Sarah Osborne, an elderly, infirm woman who had previously been involved in a scandalous affair and rarely attended church. These are not prominent members of society. They are, in many ways, already on the fringes, making them easy targets for suspicion. You might feel a sense of unease as these names are uttered, a chilling realization that the hunt has begun. Historians still debate the specific theological interpretations and nuances of Puritan belief that contributed most directly to the Salem outbreak. Was it a particular emphasis on covenant theology, or a heightened sense of millenarianism, the belief in an imminent end of the world and the final battle between good and evil? You might find yourself delving into their complex religious texts, trying to unravel the precise intellectual currents that led to such a devastating manifestation of fear. The accusations against Tituba, Sarah Good, and Sarah Osborne are a common historical fact. These three women were the first to be formally accused and arrested, marking the official beginning of the Salem witch trials. It's important to remember that in this era, social standing, or lack thereof, often played a significant role in who became a target. It's a bit like a reality TV show where the most eccentric or vulnerable contestants are voted off first. Except, in this show, being voted off meant a trip to the gallows. The chilling reality is that the Puritans, in their fervent attempts to serve God and purge their community of evil, inadvertently created a hell on earth. Their unwavering faith, when confronted with the inexplicable, led them down a path of suspicion, accusation, and ultimately its unimaginable violence. The devil, in a cruel twist of fate, found his most effective agents not in the accused witches, but in the very fears and convictions of the righteous. The examinations begin. You might find yourself among the crowd gathered at the meeting house, a sense of morbid curiosity mingling with genuine fear. The accused are brought before the magistrates, Jonathan Corwin and John Hathorne, an ancestor of Nathaniel Hawthorne. Fun fact, the afflicted girls are present, and their behavior during these examinations is truly dramatic. As an accused person enters the room, the girls might fall into fits, scream that the accused is tormenting them, or claim to see the specter of the accused attacking them. They might even mimic the accused's movements, claiming that the witch is forcing them to do so. This spectral evidence, as it comes to be known, becomes a cornerstone of the accusations. The path to salvation in Salem, you quickly learn, is a twisted one, paved not with good deeds and fervent prayer, but with a desperate, agonizing choice confession. You stand by, a silent observer, as the weight of this terrible dilemma crushes the accused, forcing them to confront a truth far more horrifying than any supernatural pact, the truth of their own survival. In a world consumed by fear, where innocence is a liability and defiance a death sentence, the act of confessing to a lie becomes a perverse form of self-preservation. You watch as Sarah Good, a woman already burdened by poverty and social ostracism, stands before the magistrates. Her responses are defiant, sometimes incoherent, which only serves to confirm the suspicions of those present. When asked why she torments the children, she might simply deny it, or mutter something that sounds like a curse. Her young daughter, Dorcas, is also questioned, and her testimony, though confused and likely coerced, further implicates her mother. It's a heartbreaking scene, watching a mother and child caught in this terrifying web of accusation. You might feel a pang of sympathy, quickly suppressed by the overwhelming fear that grips the community. The common historical fact that underscores this grim reality is that confession, even to a false accusation, was often the only way to avoid execution. If you confessed to witchcraft, admitted to signing the devil's book, and, crucially, named others who were also involved, you were typically spared the gallows. You might be imprisoned, your reputation ruined, but your life would be saved. This created a powerful, almost irresistible incentive for the accused to confess. Regardless of their actual guilt, imagine being told that the only way to prove you didn't eat the last slice of pizza is to admit you ate it and then tell them who else was thinking about eating it. It's a ridiculous scenario, but in Salem, the consequences were literally life or death. Tituba's examination, however, is a different story. Unlike Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne, who maintain their innocence, Tituba, perhaps under immense pressure and fear of violence, confesses. She tells a wild, fantastical tale of being visited by a tall, dark man, the devil himself, who promised her fine things if she would sign his book. She describes seeing other witches with him, including Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne. She even claims to have seen a yellow bird, a witch's familiar, flying with them. Her confession, filled with vivid details of black dogs, red cats, and spectral rides on broomsticks, electrifies the community. It confirms their worst fears the devil is real. He is in Salem, and he has agents among them. Her confession, a common historical fact, is a turning point, providing proof that witchcraft is indeed present and active in the village. It's like someone finally admitting to being the villain in a mystery novel, but then they start adding dragons and unicorns to the plot. You're not sure if it's true, but it's definitely entertaining in a terrifying way. You witness the transformation of individuals under this immense pressure. Some, like Tituba, were among the first to confess, their detailed, fantastical stories fueling the initial frenzy. Others, initially defiant, slowly break under the relentless interrogations, the squalid prison conditions, and the terrifying prospect of hanging. You might see a once strong man, his eyes hollowed by sleepless nights, his body trembling. Finally whisper a confession, his voice barely audible. The relief on his face, even amidst the shame, is palpable. He has chosen life, even if it means sacrificing his truth. A lesser-known detail about Tituba's confession is that it likely incorporated elements of her own cultural beliefs and the Puritan fears she had absorbed. She wasn't just making things up, she was weaving a narrative that resonated with both her own background and the expectations of her interrogators. She was, in a way, giving them the story they wanted to hear. A story that fit perfectly into their pre-existing framework of good versus evil. You might wonder if she truly believed what she was saying, or if she was simply trying to survive, to escape the immediate threat of punishment by giving them the answers they sought. It's a chilling thought. How easily fear can twist truth into something unrecognizable. A lesser-known detail is that the confessions often became elaborate, almost collaborative narratives between the accused and their interrogators. The magistrates and ministers, eager for more information about the devil's plot, would guide the accused with leading questions, suggesting details that the accused would then incorporate into their confessions. For example, if the accused mentioned seeing a black dog, the interrogator might ask, "Did this black dog have red eyes?" And the accused, desperate to please and survive, would often agree. You might observe this subtle dance of coercion and compliance, where the truth of the confession is shaped by the very people seeking it. It's like a very dark improv game where the audience keeps shouting out suggestions. And if you don't use them, you lose. The confessions, particularly Tituba's, ignite a frenzy. If the devil is truly among them, and if some have already confessed to signing his book, then who else might be involved? The afflicted girls, now seen as victims of a demonic conspiracy, gain immense power and influence. Their accusations, once viewed with skepticism by some, are now treated as divine revelations. You see the fear in people's eyes, the way they scrutinize their neighbors, wondering who might be next, who might be secretly harboring evil intentions. The community, once bound by shared faith, now finds itself tearing apart, consumed by suspicion and terror. The paradox of confession is chilling by admitting guilt. You confirmed the reality of the witchcraft epidemic and the validity of the trials, thereby strengthening the very system that was destroying innocent lives. Every confession, every name named, added another brick to the wall of collective delusion. You might feel a sense of unease as you hear a new name uttered in a confession, knowing that another person's life has just been irrevocably altered, perhaps condemned, by a lie. Historians still debate whether the afflicted girls were genuinely experiencing some form of mass hysteria, suffering from a physical ailment like ergot poisoning, or if they were consciously fabricating their symptoms for attention or other motives. Was it a psychological phenomenon? A collective delusion fueled by fear and religious fervor? Or was there a more tangible, even biological, explanation for their strange behaviors? You might find yourself pondering this question as you watch them, wondering if their cries are truly born of torment, or if there's a subtle, almost imperceptible gleam in their eyes that suggests something else entirely. It's like trying to figure out if someone is genuinely sick or just really good at faking it. But with the added complication of eternal damnation on the line, consider the case of Mary Lacey, who confessed to witchcraft after being accused. Her confession, like many others, was filled with details that mirrored the stories of the afflicted girls and other confessors. She spoke of attending witch meetings, seeing the devil, and tormenting others. While her confession saved her life, it also contributed to the growing body of evidence that the devil was indeed actively at work in the colony. You might observe her, after her confession, still imprisoned, but with a faint glimmer of hope in her eyes, a stark contrast to the despair of those who refused to yield. The initial accusations, though targeting the marginalized, quickly begin to spread to more respectable members of the community. Martha Corey, a church member in good standing, finds herself accused after openly expressing skepticism about the girl's claims. Rebecca Nurse, an elderly, highly respected woman known for her piety and good character, is also accused, much to the shock of many. These accusations against seemingly unimpeachable individuals send a wave of terror through the village, if even the most devout and respected among them could be witches. Then truly, no one is safe. You feel the walls closing in, the circle of suspicion widening, threatening to engulf everyone. Historians still debate the psychological mechanisms at play during these coerced confessions. Were the accused experiencing a form of Stockholm Syndrome, genuinely coming to believe their own fabricated stories under duress? Or were they simply making a rational, albeit agonizing, choice for survival? You might find yourself pondering the fine line between psychological breakdown and calculated self-preservation, wondering how much of the truth in these confessions was truly believed by the confessors themselves. The fear becomes a palpable entity, almost a character in itself. Stalking the narrow paths and dark homes of Salem, you see it in the darting eyes, the nervous glances, the sudden silence that falls when a group of girls passes by. People begin to accuse their neighbors, sometimes out of genuine fear, sometimes to deflect suspicion from themselves, and sometimes, perhaps, to settle old scores. The village, once a close-knit community, becomes a battleground of fear and accusation, where trust is a forgotten concept and survival depends on proving your innocence. Or, even worse, implicating someone else. It's a chilling, chaotic scene, a community devouring itself from the inside out. The act of naming others was a critical component of the confession. To prove the sincerity of your repentance, you were expected to reveal your co-conspirators, to help the authorities root out more of the devil's agents. This led to a devastating ripple effect, as each confession begat new accusations, expanding the circle of terror and drawing in more and more innocent people. You might see the anguish on the face of a confessor as they are forced to implicate a neighbor, a friend, or even a family member, knowing the terrible fate they are likely condemning them to. It's like being forced to throw someone else under the bus. But the bus is a runaway train heading for a cliff. The air in Salem now crackles with an almost electric tension. Every shadow seems to hold a secret, every unusual occurrence a sinister meaning. You feel the fear like a cold hand gripping your heart, tightening with each new accusation. The initial trickle of accusations has become a torrent, sweeping through the village and beyond, pulling in people from all walks of life. No longer are the targets just the outcasts. Now, respected members of the community, those you might have once looked up to, find themselves dragged into the terrifying vortex. It's as if the very foundations of your society are crumbling, replaced by a pervasive, insidious paranoia. The families of those who confessed also faced a complex situation. While their loved one might be spared execution, their reputation was forever tainted. They would live with the shame and suspicion of having a witch in their family, a mark that would linger for generations. You might observe the subtle ostracism, the averted gazes, the quiet whispers that followed the families of confessors, even after the immediate danger had passed. The social cost of survival was immense. The common historical fact that fuels this escalation is the widespread acceptance of spectral evidence. This was testimony from the afflicted girls and later young men that they saw the specter, or spirit of the accused person tormenting them. This torment could take many forms: pinching, biting, choking, or even forcing the afflicted to sign the devil's book. You might witness a scene in the courtroom where an accused person, perhaps an elderly woman, is standing quietly, while across the room, an afflicted girl screams and writhes, pointing at the woman, claiming the woman's invisible form is stabbing her with a needle. The magistrates, rather than questioning the reality of these invisible attacks, treat them as undeniable proof of guilt. It's like being in a court of law where the prosecution's star witness claims they saw your ghost commit the crime, and everyone just nods along. You'd think someone would say, "Wait, how exactly does a ghost stab someone?" But in Salem, that kind of logical questioning was quickly drowned out by hysteria. A lesser-known detail is that some confessors were used by the authorities to identify other witches. They would be brought into examinations and asked to point out the specters of other accused individuals, further solidifying the evidence against them. Imagine being a confessor, now a tool of the very system that accused you, forced to participate in the condemnation of others. You might feel a profound sense of complicity, a chilling realization that your survival has come at the cost of someone else's freedom, or even their life. It's like being forced to join the villain's team after they captured you, and now you have to help them capture more heroes. Not exactly a dream job. The power of the afflicted girls grows exponentially. They are no longer just victims, they are seen as instruments of God, chosen to reveal the devil's hidden agents. Their every twitch, every shriek, every accusation is taken as gospel truth. You see the magistrates, often learned men, deferring to the girls' dramatic performances, their faces etched with a mixture of awe and terror. The girls, and perhaps emboldened by the attention and the power they wield, become more theatrical in their fits. They might fall into convulsions, claim to be flying through the air, or even predict future torments. It's a chilling feedback loop. The more dramatic their afflictions, the more convinced the community becomes, and the more power the girls gain. The confessions, while saving lives, also prolonged the hysteria. Each new confession, and particularly those with vivid details of witch meetings and demonic pacts, reinforced the community's belief in the widespread conspiracy and justified the continued pursuit of witches. It was a self-perpetuating cycle of fear and false testimony, where the act of seeking salvation inadvertently fed the very beast that was devouring Salem. A lesser-known detail is the role of touch tests during the examinations. If an afflicted person was having a fit, and the accused witch touched them, the fit would supposedly cease, proving that the witch's evil influence was indeed causing the torment. Imagine the scene: an accused person, perhaps trembling with fear, is led towards a screaming, convulsing girl. As their hand makes contact, the girl suddenly goes limp, her screams dying down to a whimper. To the onlookers, this is irrefutable proof. You might feel a shiver run down your spine as you witness such a test. The apparent cessation of the fit cementing your belief in the accused's guilt. It's a bit like a magic trick, but instead of pulling a rabbit out of a hat, they're pulling a confession out of thin air. And the stakes are a lot higher than a round of applause. Historians still debate the long-term psychological impact on those who confessed and survived the trials. How did they reconcile their false confessions with their true beliefs? Did they ever truly escape the shadow of their accusations? Or did the trauma of their experience linger for the rest of their lives? You might find yourself wondering about the quiet battles fought within their minds, the silent screams of a truth suppressed for the sake of survival. The accusations begin to spread beyond Salem village, reaching into neighboring towns like Andover, Ipswich, and Topsfield. The jails in Ipswich and Boston begin to fill with accused witches, some of whom are prominent citizens. You hear stories of entire families being implicated, parents accusing children, and children accusing parents, all caught in the escalating madness. The sheer volume of accusations creates a sense of overwhelming dread. It's no longer just a local problem, it's a regional crisis, a plague of witchcraft sweeping through the colony. The weight of confession, therefore, that was not a simple burden of guilt, but a complex tapestry of fear, survival, and the tragic distortion of truth. It was a testament to the immense power of a society consumed by panic, where the very act of seeking salvation could lead to the condemnation of others, and where the human spirit was pushed to its absolute limits in the face of unimaginable terror. The choices made in those dark days, under the shadow of the gallows, forever etched themselves into the history of Salem, a chilling reminder of the price of fear. The methods of interrogation become increasingly aggressive. The accused are often subjected to long, grueling examinations, sometimes lasting for hours, designed to break their will and elicit a confession. They are deprived of sleep, food, and comfort. Magistrates and ministers press them relentlessly, urging them to confess their sins and name their co-conspirators. You might hear the faint sounds of shouting and weeping emanating from the meeting house, or the local tavern, where these examinations often take place. The pressure to confess is immense, fueled by the belief that confession is the only path to salvation, even if it means lying about your involvement with the devil. As the brutal summer of 1692 gives way to the crisp, turning leaves of autumn, a subtle but significant shift begins to ripple through the fear-stricken communities of Massachusetts Bay. You feel it in the air, a faint breeze of doubt, a quiet questioning that slowly, almost imperceptibly, starts to chip away at the monolithic conviction that has gripped Salem. The relentless pace of accusations, the sheer number of people imprisoned, and the increasingly absurd nature of some of the claims begin to strain the credulity of even the most devout. Consider the case of Bridget Bishop, the first person to be tried and executed during the trials. She was an older woman, known for her unconventional lifestyle, her multiple marriages, and her argumentative nature. She owned taverns and was seen as less conforming to Puritan ideals. Her reputation, already somewhat tarnished, made her an easy target. You might have heard whispers about her, seen her walking down the street, perhaps with a slightly defiant air. When she is accused, the spectral evidence against her is particularly dramatic. The afflicted girls claim her specter visits them, tearing at their clothes, pulling their hair, and even trying to force them to sign the devil's book. Her denials are met with scorn, her pleas of innocence dismissed as further evidence of her demonic deceit. The common historical fact that marks the beginning of the end is when accusations began to target individuals of higher social standing and greater influence, including the wife of Governor William Phips, Lady Mary Phips. This was a critical turning point, when the accusations moved beyond the marginalized and the eccentric, and started touching the very elite of the colony. It forced those in power to reevaluate the legitimacy of the proceedings. You might imagine the shock and discomfort among the magistrates and ministers when they realized that their own wives, daughters, or prominent colleagues could be next. It's like a game of musical chairs where suddenly the music stops, and the last person standing is the CEO. That tends to make people reconsider the rules of the game pretty quickly. Historians still debate whether the afflicted girls were truly experiencing a shared psychological phenomenon, a form of mass hysteria, or if there was an element of conscious manipulation or even outright fraud involved in their performances. Were they genuinely convinced by their own visions, or were they perhaps enjoying the newfound power and attention they received? You might find yourself watching their dramatic displays, trying to discern the line between genuine torment and calculated performance, a task that even today's experts struggle with. It's like trying to figure out if your cat is really stuck in the tree or just wants attention. The stakes, however, are a bit different. You observe the subtle changes in the courtroom. The afflicted girls, once met with unquestioning belief, now face a flicker of skepticism, a slight hesitation in the eyes of some onlookers. Their dramatic fits, while still potent, sometimes seem to lose their power when directed at someone undeniably pious or well-connected. You might notice a magistrate's brow furrow in thought, a quiet murmur among the crowd that suggests not fear, but a dawning realization of the madness unfolding. The sheer volume of accusations, now reaching into the hundreds, also becomes unsustainable. The jails are overflowing, and the practicalities of housing and trying, so many people become a logistical nightmare. The concept of a witch's mark or witch's teat also plays a significant role. This was believed to be a physical mark on the body where the devil, or a demonic spirit in animal form, would suck blood. You might hear of women being stripped and searched by juries of their peers, often older women looking for any unusual moles, warts, or blemishes. If a mark was found, and it was deemed insensible to the touch, meaning it didn't hurt when pricked, it was considered further proof of witchcraft. Imagine the humiliation, the violation of privacy, as these searches are conducted. It's a chilling reminder of how deeply the fear of the devil permeated every aspect of life, even the most intimate. A bit like a very invasive and terrifying medical exam, but instead of a diagnosis, you get a death sentence. A lesser-known detail that contributes to this waning madness is the growing concern among some ministers and intellectuals about the theological implications of spectral evidence. While Cotton Mather initially supported the trials, his father, Increase Mather, and other prominent clergymen began to voice serious doubts about the reliability of testimony based on spectral visions. They argued that the devil was cunning enough to appear in the form of an innocent person, meaning that spectral evidence alone could not be used to convict someone of witchcraft. This was a crucial theological loophole, a way to question the evidence without questioning the existence of witchcraft itself. You might hear these nuanced debates, perhaps in hushed tones among the educated elite, realizing that the very framework of their belief system was being subtly undermined from within. It's like finding a critical bug in your operating system that allows hackers to impersonate your friends. Suddenly, you can't trust anyone's identity online, and the whole system starts to look shaky. The magistrates, though initially hesitant, become increasingly convinced by the accumulating evidence. They are men of their time, deeply religious, and genuinely believe they are fighting a holy war against the forces of evil. They see the girl's afflictions as undeniable proof of the devil's presence, and the confessions, especially Tituba's, as confirmation of a vast satanic conspiracy. You might see the grim determination on their faces, the weight of their responsibility pressing down on them as they send more and more people to jail. They believe they are doing God's work, purging their community of evil. Governor Phips, whose own wife was now under suspicion, became increasingly concerned about the direction of the trials. He had returned to a colony in chaos, consumed by a legal process that seemed to be spiraling out of control. The common historical fact is that Governor Phips, in October 1692, ordered a halt to the court of Oyer and Terminer, and forbade the use of spectral evidence in future trials. This was a monumental decision, effectively pulling the plug on the entire witch hunt. You feel a wave of relief, a collective sigh, as this news spreads through the communities. The fear doesn't vanish overnight, but the immediate threat of arbitrary accusation and execution begins to recede. The fear is contagious, spreading like wildfire through the closely packed homes and minds of the villagers. You find yourself questioning everyone, even those you've known your entire life. A strange glance, a mumbled word, an old argument, all can be reinterpreted through the lens of witchcraft. The bonds of community, once so strong, begin to fray under the relentless pressure of suspicion. Neighbors who once helped each other with harvests now eye each other with distrust. Friendships dissolve. Families turn on one another. It's a social fabric being torn apart thread by thread. The impact of this decision is immediate and profound. Without spectral evidence, the primary tool of the prosecution is gone. Accusations, once so potent, now lack the weight of proof they once carried. The afflicted girls, stripped of their most powerful weapon, find their influence rapidly diminishing. You might see them still attempting their fits, still pointing fingers, but the audience is no longer as captivated. The magistrates no longer as convinced. Their performances, once terrifying, now seem merely pathetic, or even manipulative. It's like a band whose hit song was based entirely on special effects, and then the special effects budget gets cut. Suddenly, it's just a bunch of people awkwardly standing on stage. The accused are often denied legal counsel, and the trials are conducted in a manner that heavily favors the prosecution. The accused are presumed guilty until proven innocent, a stark contrast to modern legal systems. Their own testimony, if it denies witchcraft, is often seen as further evidence of their deceit, as the devil would naturally compel them to lie. You might hear the frustrated cries of those on trial, their desperate attempts to explain away the spectral evidence, to appeal to reason, only to be met with deaf ears and hardened hearts. It's a system designed to find guilt, not to uncover truth. Historians still debate the precise combination of factors that led to the end of the trials. Was it primarily the intervention of Governor Phips, the growing theological opposition to spectral evidence, the sheer scale of the accusations, or simply the exhaustion of a community that could no longer sustain such intense paranoia? You might find yourself considering the intricate web of social, political, and religious pressures that finally brought the madness to a halt. Realizing that no single cause can fully explain the turning tide, the escalating number of accusations also creates a logistical nightmare. The jails are overflowing, conditions are deplorable, and many accused individuals fall ill or die before even coming to trial. You might hear the rattling of chains, the moans of the sick, the desperate prayers emanating from the overcrowded cells. The sheer scale of the arrests, a common historical fact, highlights the rapid and uncontrolled spread of the hysteria. It's like a small town suddenly deciding that everyone who owns a cat is a supervillain, and then trying to fit all the cat owners into the local jail. It just doesn't work. The jails, once overflowing, slowly begin to empty. Many accused individuals are released, often after months of horrific confinement, their health broken, their lives irrevocably scarred. You might see them emerge pale and gaunt, blinking in the sunlight, their eyes still holding the haunted look of those who have stared into the abyss. Their release is not an act of justice, but a cessation of injustice, a quiet acknowledgement that the system had gone terribly wrong. The community is left to grapple with the aftermath, the broken trust, the shattered families, and the lingering shame of what they have collectively allowed to happen. Historians still debate the extent to which socioeconomic factors, such as land disputes and class divisions between the wealthier Salem town and the more agrarian Salem village, played a direct role in determining who was accused and who became an accuser. Was it simply a matter of religious zeal? Or were underlying resentments and power struggles subtly influencing the course of the trials? You might observe the subtle tensions between the more established families and the newer, less prosperous ones, and wonder if these earthly concerns were truly separate from the spiritual battle being waged. A lesser-known detail is that some of the accused who had confessed were pressured to recant their confessions once the tide began to turn. They had confessed to save their lives, but now, with the trials winding down, they were urged to admit their confessions were false. This put them in another difficult position to admit they lied under duress, potentially inviting new charges, or to continue living with the stigma of being a confessed witch. You might hear the quiet struggles of these individuals, caught between two impossible truths, their lives a testament to the enduring trauma of the trials. It's like being forced to admit you cheated on a test to avoid expulsion, and then, after the school changes its policy, they ask you to publicly declare you lied about cheating. You just can't win. The unseen hand of the devil, as the Puritans believed, was indeed at work, but perhaps not in the way they imagined. It was the unseen hand of fear, of superstition, of unresolved grievances, and of a judicial system ill-equipped to handle such a crisis. It was the hand that gripped the hearts of the afflicted, the hand that pointed the finger of accusation, and the hand that tightened the noose. And as the spring turns into summer, the horror in Salem only deepens, promising a grim harvest of lives. The new court, the Superior Court of Judicature, established in January 1693, adopts a stricter policy regarding evidence, largely disallowing spectral testimony. This shift, a common historical fact, effectively ensures that the witch hunt cannot resume its previous deadly course. While some trials continue, the convictions are far fewer, and no more executions take place. The legal landscape has fundamentally changed, reflecting a growing awareness of the dangers of unchecked zeal and unsubstantiated accusations. As the spring of 1692 gives way to a sweltering summer, the legal machinery of Massachusetts Bay Colony grinds into motion, transforming the initial examinations into formal trials. You feel the shift in the air, a heavier, more oppressive atmosphere. As the accusations move from the meeting house to the courthouse, the stakes are no longer just public humiliation or imprisonment. They are now life and death. The arrival of Governor William Phips, returning from England, brings with it the establishment of a special court of oyer and terminer, literally, to hear and to determine, specifically created to deal with the overwhelming number of witchcraft cases. This court, composed of leading magistrates and appointed by the governor, is meant to bring order to the chaos, but in reality, it only accelerates the tragic process. The silence that descends upon Salem is not one of peace, but of profound exhaustion and lingering grief. The frantic energy of the witch hunt dissipates, leaving behind a void filled with regret and unanswered questions. You feel the collective sigh of a community slowly waking from a nightmare, trying to piece together the fragments of what they have done. The madness has faded, but its scars will remain, deeply etched into the land and the memory of its people. The horrifying truth about the Salem witch trials is not just in the accusations and executions, but in the slow, agonizing process by which a community came to terms with its own terrifying descent into darkness. The common historical fact that defines this phase is the pivotal role of the court of oyer and terminer, which began its sessions in June 1692. This court, rather than a jury of peers, often relied heavily on the testimonies of the afflicted and the confessions of the accused. You might find yourself squeezed into the crowded courtroom, the air thick with the smell of sweat and fear, as the proceedings unfold. The judges, clad in their somber robes, sit on a raised platform, their expressions grave. The accused stand before them, often looking bewildered or defiant, their pleas of innocence drowned out by the dramatic outbursts of the afflicted. It's like watching a legal drama where the rules are made up on the fly, and the main evidence is based on someone having a really bad day. You'd think there'd be a rule about, say, actual physical evidence, but nope, not here. As the chilling grip of the witch trials loosens, a new, equally profound shift begins to take hold in the hearts and minds of the people of Massachusetts Bay. You sense a collective awakening, a slow, painful reckoning with the horrors that transpired. The frantic energy of accusation gives way to a heavy silence, a quiet shame that permeates the very air of Salem and its surrounding towns. This chapter delves into the aftermath, the attempts at atonement, and the long, arduous journey towards healing a community irrevocably scarred. The trials themselves are a chilling spectacle. You observe the accused, their faces pale and drawn from weeks or months in the squalid jails, attempting to defend themselves against accusations that defy logic. They are often denied legal counsel, forced to speak for themselves against the combined weight of the magistrates, the ministers, and the highly convincing performances of the afflicted girls. The atmosphere is charged with emotion. The girls scream, contort, and fall into fits, claiming to be tormented by the specters of the accused. When a defendant might shift their weight or look a certain way, the girls would mimic the movement, claiming the witch was forcing them to do it. It's an almost theatrical display of suffering, designed to sway public opinion and, crucially, the minds of the judges. The common historical fact that marks this period is the official apologies and acts of restitution that began years after the trials concluded. In 1697, the Massachusetts General Court declared a day of public fasting and prayer to atone for the tragedy of the trials. Judge Samuel Sewall, one of the magistrates of the court of Oyer and Terminer, publicly apologized for his role, standing before his congregation while his confession of error was read aloud. You might imagine the solemnity of that moment, the weight of his words echoing through the meeting house, a rare and poignant admission of profound wrongdoing. It's like when you finally admit you were wrong after a really big argument, and everyone just kind of stares at you because they're so used to you being stubborn. It's a small step, but a significant one. A lesser-known detail about the trials is the use of prayer tests. Accused witches were sometimes asked to recite the Lord's Prayer. It was believed that a witch, being in league with the devil, would be unable to recite it perfectly, often stumbling over words or making errors. Imagine the pressure your life hangs in the balance, and you're asked to perform a simple act of faith, knowing that any slip-up, any moment of nervousness, could be interpreted as damning evidence of your guilt. You might see an accused person, their voice trembling, trying to utter the familiar words, only to falter, their eyes wide with terror as the magistrates exchange knowing glances. It's a bit like being asked to sing your national anthem perfectly on live television. But if you hit a wrong note, you go to jail. Talk about performance anxiety. You observe the lingering effects of the hysteria on the survivors. Those who were imprisoned, especially those who confessed under duress, carry the heavy burden of their past. Their reputations are tarnished, their lives often in ruins. Many struggle to rebuild, to find acceptance in communities that once condemned them. You might see the quiet resilience in their eyes, or the deep-seated trauma that forever marks their expressions. The memory of the jails, the interrogations, and the gallows haunts them, a constant reminder of the fragility of justice and the destructive power of mass delusion. The first person brought to trial before the court of Oyer and Terminer is Bridget Bishop, the same woman you heard about earlier, known for her independent spirit and unconventional life. Despite her vehement denials, the spectral evidence against her is overwhelming. Witnesses testify that her specter has appeared to them, tormenting them, and that she has caused harm to their livestock. The touch test, where the afflicted girl's fits supposedly ceased when she touched them, is also presented as compelling evidence. You hear the pronouncement of guilty, a word that sends a cold shiver down your spine. On June 10, 1692, Bridget Bishop is led to Gallows Hill and hanged. She is the first of many. A lesser-known detail about the aftermath is that the afflicted girls, once powerful figures, largely faded into obscurity. Their moment of intense influence passed, and many struggled to reintegrate into normal society. Some married and lived quiet lives, while others faced continued social stigma or psychological difficulties. Imagine being a young person who held the power of life and death over your neighbors, only to have that power vanish overnight, leaving you with the chilling memory of what you did. You might wonder about their own internal struggles, the nightmares that surely plagued them, and whether they ever truly understood the magnitude of their actions. It's like being the star of a wildly popular but deeply problematic reality show. And then suddenly the show gets canceled, and you're left with nothing but the fallout. Her execution, a common historical fact, marks a grim turning point. It signals to the community, and to all the accused that the court is serious, that the accusations are real, and that the consequences are deadly, the fear intensifies, driving more people to confess, hoping to save their lives, and more people to accuse, hoping to deflect suspicion from themselves. The hangings continue throughout the summer, a horrifying procession of victims. Sarah Good, Rebecca Nurse, Susanna Martin, Elizabeth Howe, and Sarah Wiles are all executed on July 19th. George Burroughs, Martha Corey, John Proctor, George Jacobs Sr., John Willard, and others follow on August 19th. Martha Corey's husband, Giles Corey, is also accused. The families of the victims, those who were executed or died in prison, faced immense grief and a prolonged struggle for justice. They sought to clear the names of their loved ones, to restore their honor, and to reclaim confiscated property. This was not an easy task, as the legal system moved slowly, and the wounds of the community ran deep. You might hear their persistent pleas, their unwavering determination to ensure that the memory of their innocent family members was not forever stained by the accusations of witchcraft. It's a long, arduous fight for historical rectification, a battle against collective amnesia. Historians still debate the extent to which the personal biases and prior relationships of the accusers and accused influence the outcomes of the trials. Were the accusations truly random? Or were there underlying feuds, jealousies, or resentments that played a role in who was targeted and who was spared? You might recall the simmering land disputes or the contentious relationships between certain families in Salem Village, and wonder if these earthly grievances were subtly, or not so subtly, guiding the hands of the accusers. It's like a small-town drama where everyone has a hidden agenda, but instead of just ruining someone's reputation, they're ruining their life. The Massachusetts government, over the decades, slowly worked to reverse the convictions and provide restitution to the victims' families. In 1711, the General Court passed an act that reversed the attainders' convictions for many of the accused and granted monetary compensation to their heirs. This was a common historical fact, a formal acknowledgement by the colonial government that a grave injustice had been committed. You might imagine the bittersweet relief of the surviving families, finally seeing some measure of official recognition for the suffering they endured, even if it could never truly bring back their loved ones or erase the trauma. It's like getting a formal apology for something that happened generations ago. It's appreciated, but it can't undo the past. The concept of confession becomes a perverse form of salvation. If you confess to witchcraft, admit your dealings with the devil, and name others who are also involved, you are spared execution. You are seen as having repented, as having returned to God's grace. However, if you maintain your innocence, if you refuse to confess, you are almost certainly condemned to death. This creates an impossible dilemma for the accused, to lie and live, or to tell the truth and die. You witness the agonizing choices people are forced to make, the desperate hope in the eyes of those who choose to confess, and the grim resolve of those who refuse to compromise their integrity. Historians still debate the extent to which the apologies and acts of restitution truly healed the divisions within the communities affected by the trials. While official recognition was important, did it truly mend the broken trust between neighbors, or the lingering suspicions that had festered for so long? You might find yourself considering the deep psychological scars left on the social fabric, and wonder how many generations it took for the shadow of Salem to truly lift from the land. A particularly harrowing case is that of Giles Corey, an 80-year-old farmer accused of witchcraft. He refuses to enter a plea neither guilty nor innocent, because he knows that if he is tried, he will be condemned, and his property will be confiscated, leaving his heirs with nothing. To force a plea, the court resorts to a brutal form of torture known as peine forte et dure, or pressing. You hear the horrific accounts Giles is laid on the ground, and heavy stones are slowly piled onto his chest, crushing him. His only words, uttered repeatedly as the weight increases, are, "More weight." He endures 2 days of this agony before finally succumbing, dying without ever entering a plea. His death, a common historical fact, is a stark testament to the barbarity of the trials and the unwavering courage of some of the accused. It's a bit like being asked to choose between two terrible options, and you decide to just break the game instead. But the game, in this case, breaks you. The legacy of the Salem witch trials became a powerful cautionary tale for future generations in America. It served as a stark reminder of the dangers of religious extremism, unchecked judicial power, and the terrifying consequences of mass hysteria. You might hear stories passed down through families, whispers of the dark days when fear ruled and reason fled. The phrase witch hunt itself, a common historical fact, entered the English lexicon as a metaphor for baseless accusations and persecutions, a direct linguistic legacy of the events in Salem. It's a bit like how we still use phrases like drinking the Kool-Aid to describe blind allegiance, a chilling echo of a past tragedy. The executions take place on Gallows Hill, a desolate rise outside the village. You might stand among the silent, somber crowd, watching as the condemned are led to the gallows. The air is heavy, not just with the scent of pine and damp earth, but with a palpable sense of dread. The ministers offer last-minute prayers, urging the condemned to confess and save their souls, even as their bodies are about to be extinguished. The silence of the crowd is broken only by the creak of the rope, the final gasp of a life unjustly taken. It's a scene that will haunt the collective memory of New England for centuries. The physical landscape of Salem also bears the marks of the trials. Gallows Hill, where the executions took place, remains a somber reminder of the lives lost. Though the exact spot of the gallows is still debated by historians, the hill itself stands as a silent monument to human folly and suffering. You might walk its slopes, feeling the weight of history beneath your feet, the echoes of desperate cries carried on the wind. It's a place where the past feels palpably close, a testament to the enduring power of memory. The sheer number of executions, 19 by hanging, along with Giles Corey's pressing, and several others who died in prison, is a chilling common historical fact. These numbers represent not just statistics, but individual lives, families shattered, and a community forever scarred. The speed and scale of these deaths underscore the unchecked power of the court and the pervasive grip of fear. It's like a terrible domino effect, where each falling piece brings down another, until the entire structure collapses. A lesser-known detail is that many of the descendants of the victims, and even some of the accusers, continued to live in the Salem area for generations. Carrying the burden of their ancestors' roles in the tragedy, family histories were often shaped by these events, with some families actively working to clear their ancestors' names, while others tried to forget or deny their connection to the dark period. Imagine the complex, often painful, conversations that must have taken place across generations. The stories whispered or suppressed as families grappled with their place in this horrifying chapter of history. It's like having a family secret that everyone knows but no one talks about, except this secret involved public hangings. Historians still debate the specific psychological and sociological factors that contributed to the intensity and duration of the Salem witch trials. Was it a unique confluence of religious extremism, social anxiety, and individual opportunism? Or were there broader patterns of behavior that can be observed in other historical instances of mass hysteria? You might find yourself searching for a single unifying explanation, only to realize that the truth is far more complex. A tangled web of human frailties and societal pressures, the memory of the Salem witch trials serves as a constant reminder of the importance of critical thinking, due process, and the protection of individual rights, even in times of intense fear and uncertainty. It's a lesson that resonates through the centuries, a warning against the dangers of allowing fear to override reason, and of surrendering to the seductive power of collective delusion. You feel the weight of this historical lesson, a quiet plea from the past to remain vigilant against the forces that can twist truth and destroy lives. As the summer wears on, the accusations become increasingly outlandish. Even prominent figures, including the wife of Governor Phipps himself, Lady Mary Phipps, are accused. This escalation, a common historical fact, begins to sow seeds of doubt among some of the more influential members of the colony. If even the most respected and well-connected individuals could be accused, then perhaps the system itself is flawed. The sheer absurdity of some of the later accusations starts to chip away at the unwavering belief in the girls' testimonies. It's like a conspiracy theory that starts off believable, but then adds aliens and Bigfoot, and you start to think, okay, maybe this isn't entirely accurate. Historians still debate the full extent of the social and psychological recovery of the Salem community after the trials. Did the trauma ever truly fade? Or did it leave an indelible mark on the collective psyche, shaping future generations in subtle, unseen ways? You might find yourself contemplating the long shadow cast by such events, and the enduring human capacity for both cruelty and resilience. The ministers and intellectuals of the colony, who had initially supported the trials, begin to express reservations. Cotton Mather, a prominent Puritan minister, while still believing in witchcraft, starts to caution against the excessive reliance on spectral evidence. He argues that the devil could appear in the shape of an innocent person, thus making spectral evidence unreliable. This theological argument, a common historical fact, provides a crucial crack in the foundation of the trials. It's like a bug in the software that everyone was using, and suddenly someone points it out, and everyone realizes the whole program might be faulty. The legacy of the Salem witch trials is not just a historical footnote. It is a living testament to the fragility of justice and the enduring power of human fear. It is a story that continues to resonate because its core themes, the dangers of unchecked power, the seductive nature of hysteria, and the importance of protecting individual liberties remain eternally relevant. The echoes of Salem remind you that the battle against irrational fear and injustice is an ongoing one, a vigilance that must never falter. The Court of Oyer and Terminer, despite its grim efficiency, is ultimately a temporary measure. As the autumn leaves begin to fall, and the chill returns to the air, the madness of the summer begins to wane. Not with a sudden stop, but with a slow, agonizing deceleration. The sheer exhaustion of the community, the growing doubts, and the increasing number of influential people being accused all contribute to this shift. The harvest of lives has been brutal, and the community is left to grapple with the horrifying truth of what has transpired. As the dust settled on the horrifying events of 1692, the people of Salem and beyond were left with a profound and unsettling question: what really happened? Centuries later, that question continues to captivate historians, sociologists, psychologists, and even scientists. You'll find yourself now in the modern era, looking back through the lens of scientific inquiry and critical analysis, trying to unravel the complex tapestry of factors that led to such a devastating outbreak of mass hysteria and injustice. You stand in the shadow of the courthouse, the air still heavy with the lingering scent of fear and the unspoken questions that hang over the community. The trials have reached a fever pitch, and the lives of the accused hang by the thinnest of threads. This chapter plunges you into the heart of their desperate struggle for survival, as they face a system designed to condemn them, not to find justice. You will witness their pleas, their defiance, and the chilling reality of their fate. The common historical fact that modern theories often converge on is the concept of mass psychogenic illness, or mass hysteria. This theory suggests that the symptoms exhibited by the afflicted girls, such as convulsions, screaming, and strange contortions, were not faked, but were genuine, albeit psychologically induced. Physical reactions to extreme stress, fear, and the intense social pressure of their Puritan environment. You might imagine the girls living under strict religious and social constraints, experiencing a collective anxiety that manifested physically. It's like when you get so stressed about a deadline that your stomach starts doing flip-flops. But in their case, it was a whole-body performance, and everyone in the audience was convinced it was a magic show. The common historical fact that defines the plight of the accused is their almost complete lack of legal recourse. There was no concept of due process as we understand it today. Accused individuals were not allowed to have lawyers represent them, nor were they permitted to call witnesses in their defense in the same way the prosecution could. You might imagine yourself accused of a crime you didn't commit, standing alone against a panel of powerful judges, a room full of terrified onlookers, and the dramatic, seemingly irrefutable testimony of the afflicted. Your voice, no matter how earnest or logical, would be a mere whisper against the roar of collective hysteria. It's like being in a debate where your opponent is allowed to bring a marching band and a fireworks display, and you're only allowed to use interpretive dance. The odds are not in your favor. You consider the various contributing factors that scholars have proposed. One prominent theory, a lesser-known detail that gained traction in the 1970s, suggests that ergot poisoning might have played a role. Ergot is a fungus that grows on rye and other grains, particularly in damp conditions, and, if consumed, it can cause symptoms similar to those described by the afflicted convulsions, hallucinations, and a crawling sensation on the skin. Given that rye was a staple crop in colonial New England, and the weather conditions leading up to 1692 were reportedly favorable for ergot growth, this theory offers a compelling, albeit not universally accepted, biological explanation. You might picture the rye fields, swaying gently in the wind, harboring a silent, microscopic menace that contributed to the unfolding tragedy. It's like finding out your favorite snack was secretly laced with something that made everyone think they could fly. Not ideal for public safety. You see the faces of the accused, etched with a mixture of terror, confusion, and sometimes a quiet dignity. There's Rebecca Nurse, an elderly woman of impeccable reputation, who, despite her advanced age and respected standing, is accused. Her neighbors and friends signed petitions attesting to her good character, but these are largely dismissed by the court. You hear her weak, trembling voice denying the charges, her pleas falling on deaf ears. Her very piety, in the twisted logic of the trials, is sometimes seen as a clever deception by the devil. It's a cruel irony, isn't it? The more virtuous you seem, the more likely they are to believe you're a master of disguise for the forces of evil. The socio-economic tensions within Salem Village also receive significant attention in modern analysis. Historians still debate whether the geographic and economic divisions between the more prosperous mercantile families of Salem town and the more agrarian. Struggling families of Salem Village were merely background noise or a significant underlying cause. You might recall the earlier discussions about land disputes and the contentious relationship with Reverend Paris. Many of the accusers came from the more traditional Salem Village, while a disproportionate number of the accused were from the wealthier, more commercially oriented Salem town, or were individuals who challenged the traditional social order. This suggests that underlying resentments and power struggles, perhaps unconsciously, fueled the accusations. It's like a neighborhood feud that escalates from passive-aggressive lawn decorations to full-blown accusations of witchcraft. Escalation. Thy name is human nature. A lesser-known detail is that some of the accused, particularly those who were strong in their faith, would recite the Lord's Prayer perfectly or quote scripture, hoping to prove their innocence. However, even these acts of piety were often turned against them. The magistrates might argue that the devil was allowing them to do so to further his deception, or that they were merely performing a trick. Imagine the despair of trying to prove your innocence by demonstrating your faith, only to have that faith used as further evidence of your guilt. You might see the accused, their eyes pleading, their voices cracking, as their desperate attempts to connect with God are twisted into proof of their connection to the devil. It's like trying to prove you're a good person by doing charity work, but then everyone assumes you're just doing it to hide your secret villain lair. Psychological interpretations also delve into the dynamics of the afflicted girls themselves. Were they consciously manipulating the situation for attention, power, or to escape the rigid confines of Puritan life? Or were they genuinely caught in a complex web of self-deception and collective delusion? You might consider the immense power they suddenly wielded, the attention they received, and how intoxicating that must have been for young women in a society where their voices were rarely heard. This isn't to say they were evil or entirely calculating, but rather to acknowledge the complex interplay of human psychology, social dynamics, and the unprecedented circumstances they found themselves in. Then there's John Proctor, a prosperous farmer and tavern keeper who initially scoffed at the accusations, believing the afflicted girls were faking their symptoms or being manipulated. He openly criticized the trials, arguing that the girls were witches themselves. His skepticism, a common historical fact, quickly made him a target. You might have heard him speak out, his voice booming with common sense, trying to bring reason to the madness. But in Salem, reason was a dangerous weapon, easily turned against its wielder. When he is accused, his wife Elizabeth is also implicated, and their entire family is drawn into the nightmare. Historians still debate the precise interplay and relative importance of these various factors: religious fervor, social tensions, psychological dynamics, and potential environmental influences in explaining the Salem witch trials. Was there one primary driver, or was it a perfect storm of unfortunate circumstances, each factor exacerbating the others? You might find yourself weighing the evidence for each theory, trying to construct a comprehensive understanding of an event that defies simple explanation, The Proctor's trial is particularly tragic. John Proctor steadfastly maintains his innocence, refusing to confess even under immense pressure. He argues passionately against the spectral evidence, pointing out its inherent unreliability. He even tries to get his servants, some of whom were among the afflicted, to recant their testimonies. But his efforts are in vain. The girls' performances in the courtroom are particularly dramatic during his trial, further solidifying the judge's conviction of his guilt. You might feel a knot of dread in your stomach as you witness his unwavering defiance, knowing that in this court, such integrity is a death sentence. The role of gender in the trials is another area of modern focus. The common historical fact is that the vast majority of those accused and executed were women. This has led scholars to explore the deep-seated misogyny of the era, the fear of female independence, and the societal pressures placed upon women in Puritan society. Women who were outspoken, who owned property, who were elderly and without male protectors, or who simply didn't conform to the expected norms were often more vulnerable to accusation. You might reflect on the subtle ways in which fear of the other, particularly the other who challenged patriarchal norms, manifested in such destructive ways. It's like a historical version of the internet comments section, where anyone who deviates from the norm gets piled on, but with much, much worse real-world consequences. A chilling aspect of the trials, a common historical fact, is the way children were not only accusers, but also sometimes accused. Dorcas Good. Sarah Good's 4-year-old daughter was imprisoned and questioned. She was even said to have confessed to seeing her mother tormenting others. Imagine a child so young caught in this terrifying maelstrom, likely confused and terrified, being coerced into a confession that would condemn her own mother. You might see her small, bewildered face, her eyes wide with fear, as she is forced to parrot words she barely understands. It's a horrifying illustration of how deeply the paranoia had seeped into every corner of society, sparing no one, not even the most innocent. It's like a game of telephone where the message starts with, "I saw a witch," and ends with, "Your 4-year-old is secretly a demon lord." And everyone believes it. Furthermore, the legal system's failings are critically examined. The acceptance of spectral evidence, the lack of legal counsel for the accused, and the pressure to confess are seen as fundamental flaws that allowed the hysteria to spiral out of control. The trials were not about proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, but about confirming a pre-existing belief in a satanic conspiracy. You might consider how easily a system designed for justice can be perverted when fear takes hold, and how crucial safeguards like the presumption of innocence and the right to legal representation truly are. The prisons themselves become a living hell. You might hear the constant clamor of chains, the desperate cries for food and water, the coughing and moaning of those succumbing to illness. The conditions are unsanitary, overcrowded, and brutal. Many accused individuals die in prison before even reaching trial, their lives extinguished not by the hangman's noose, but by the sheer neglect and cruelty of their confinement. You might try to imagine the despair, the cold, the hunger, the constant fear of what tomorrow might bring, knowing that your only hope is a confession that would be a lie. A lesser-known detail about the aftermath and modern interpretation is the concept of post-traumatic stress among the survivors and the community. While not a term used in the 17th century, modern psychologists suggest that the collective trauma of the trials, the loss of loved ones, the imprisonment, and the shattered trust would have left deep, lasting psychological scars on the individuals and the community as a whole. You might imagine the silent suffering, the nightmares, the lingering paranoia that would have affected generations, even after the official apologies and acts of restitution. It's like trying to move on after a really bad group project. Except the project involved accusing your neighbors of witchcraft and then hanging them. That's probably going to stick with you for a while. The psychological toll on the accused is immense. Many are subjected to relentless interrogation, sleep deprivation, and the constant threat of execution. Some, like Tituba, confess, perhaps believing it's their only way out, or perhaps genuinely convinced by the fervor around them that they must be guilty. Others, like John Proctor and Rebecca Nurse, refuse to compromise their integrity, choosing death over a false confession. Their steadfastness, while admirable, often seals their fate. You might wonder if you were in their shoes, what choice you would make. Would you cling to your truth, or would you say anything to survive? It's a question that echoes through the centuries, a testament to the impossible choices forced upon them. The Salem witch trials, therefore, serve as a chilling case study in the dangers of religious extremism, social conformity, and the seductive power of fear. They remind us that even in seemingly enlightened societies, the seeds of irrationality and persecution can lie dormant, waiting for the right conditions to bloom into something truly horrifying. The horrifying truth about the Salem witch trials is not just about witches and devils, but about the very human capacity for both profound cruelty and profound self-deception when gripped by collective panic. Historians still debate whether a single factor was the primary cause of the Salem witch trial, or whether it was a complex combination of religious, social, economic, and psychological factors that created a perfect storm of fear and madness. And now, as the story of Salem slowly fades, you may feel a heaviness in the air, a distant echo of prayers and cries. Let those images fade, like morning mist in the dawn. Tonight, we have traveled together through a dark time, where fear turned neighbors into enemies and suspicion distorted reason. But in this story, there are also glimmers of resilience, of people standing up for the truth, and of a community that eventually found its way back to the light. Let the lessons of Salem sink in as a gentle reminder that vigilance and compassion are our beacons in the darkness. Take a deep breath, feel the peace of the night, and know that you have returned safely from this journey. It is over. Historians still debate the true motivations behind the confessions. Were they genuine admissions of guilt, born of a twisted religious conviction? Or were they strategic attempts to escape the gallows, a desperate gamble for survival? You might find yourself considering the immense pressure, the fear of torture, and the promise of leniency that accompanied a confession, and wonder how many truly believed they were signing the devil's book, and how many were simply signing their own reprieve.